The cold dismissal landed like a physical blow, though Sophia merely stood, her back ramrod straight, her gaze fixed on a point just beyond Eleanor Atherton's furious, trembling finger, a silent, unyielding dignity radiating from her as the words, sharp and final, sliced through the opulent silence of the Atherton study, echoing with a chilling finality that seemed to ripple through the very foundations of the grand manor. "You're fired, Sophia. Pack your things. This instant. Your blatant disregard for Daniel's well-being is unforgivable, a betrayal of everything we trusted you with." Her heart, a weary drum of unwavering devotion that had beat for this family, for this fragile boy, for over 2 decades, constricted painfully, not just for herself, for the abrupt severance of a life she had meticulously woven into the fabric of this household, but far more profoundly, for the silent, terrified boy whose life she knew, with an agonizing certainty that felt like a premonition of death itself, was now teetering on a precipice, a terrifying edge that none of them, blinded by their anger, their privilege, and their unshakable faith in the sterile confines of conventional medicine, could possibly comprehend, for Sophia had seen the warning signs that very morning, the subtle tremors in Daniel's eyes, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in his usually steady hand as he reached for his water glass, the faint, yet distinct, aroma of bitter almond on his breath that spoke of a dangerous metabolic shift, all of them potent, undeniable signals of the rare, insidious neurological illness that stalked their only son, an illness so enigmatic, so prone to unpredictable, life-threatening episodes, that the legion of esteemed doctors and specialists they had consulted from across the globe had yet to fully diagnose its true underlying cause, an elusive enemy only Sophia, with her keen, intuitive understanding of Daniel's exquisitely fragile system, honed by years of tireless, loving observation, truly recognized, truly felt in her bones, and the irony, sharp and bitter as gall, was that the very act for which she was now being condemned, the specific, unconventional, and inherently risky measure she had taken, was the precise, desperate action that had, for now, held death at bay, a silent, secret act of profound, selfless love that would, in the cruelest twist of fate, lead to her immediate, unceremonious, and devastating expulsion from the home she had nurtured, from the boy she had protected, leaving him utterly vulnerable to the very darkness she had fought so fiercely, so meticulously, to keep at bay, a darkness that would surely return with her departure, unchecked and merciless, a horrifying realization that threatened to buckle Sophia's knees, to shatter her composure, yet she stood, unyielding, her gaze unwavering, knowing that her silence, born not of guilt but of an even deeper, more complex loyalty to Daniel's fragile privacy and a grim understanding of the Athertons' inability to comprehend, was both her unbearable burden and her final, desperate gamble for Daniel's survival. A gamble that would weigh on her soul with an unbearable gravity. Sophia had arrived at Atherton Manor 30 years ago, a shy, soft-spoken young woman barely out of her teens, her skin the color of rich earth, her heart full of a quiet hope and a fierce determination to make a new life for herself, having left behind the modest, vibrant, but often challenging streets of her childhood, where community was wealth and resilience a daily bread, stepping with trepidation into a world of polished marble, hushed whispers, and gleaming chandeliers that seemed to hum with the echoes of generations past, a majestic fortress of wealth and lineage, and over the decades, through tireless effort and unwavering dedication, she had become more than just a maid. She was the silent anchor of the Atherton household, the steady, invisible presence behind the scenes, her hands strong and capable, her wisdom often guiding in subtle, unacknowledged ways, her quiet efficiency ensuring the smooth, unblemished operation of their sprawling estate, a meticulous orchestration of domesticity that allowed the Athertons to glide through their lives with an almost regal ease, and she had seen Arthur and Eleanor transform from a starry-eyed young couple, full of youthful exuberance and ambition, into the formidable, often distant figures of high society, their lives a blur of charity galas, exclusive club memberships, and meticulously curated appearances, their personal connection often overshadowed by the relentless demands of their public personas, but it was with their son, Daniel, born frail and prone to mysterious, debilitating ailments, that Sophia had forged an unbreakable bond, a connection deeper and more profound, more instinctual, than any she shared with his parents, for Daniel, a boy of exceptional intellect and a gentle, introspective spirit, was plagued by a rare neurological condition that manifested in unpredictable, often terrifying episodes, moments when his body would betray him with violent tremors, his mind would cloud into a terrifying fog, and his very life seemed to hang by a thread, his small, fragile existence a constant source of anxiety for the family, and for years, through countless sleepless nights and watchful days, Sophia had been his quiet guardian, his shadow, diligently learning the subtle nuances of his condition, recognizing the early warning signs even before Daniel himself did, Knowing the precise fraction of a degree in his forehead temperature that signaled an impending crisis, the exact shade of gray that appeared around his lips when his blood sugar plummeted to dangerous levels, the specific, almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand that foreshadowed a severe seizure, a knowledge she had painstakingly acquired through years of tireless vigilance, reading countless medical texts in her scant free time, experimenting with traditional remedies passed down through her own family's lore, and an unwavering, selfless devotion that transcended the conventional boundaries of employer and employee, a love that felt as primal and fierce as a mother's, a bond Arthur and Eleanor, perpetually engrossed in their own demanding lives, often too focused on external pressures and the advice of highly paid professionals, often took for granted, their gratitude often expressed through larger bonuses or perfunctory thanks rather than a true understanding of the depth of her care, often mistaking her quiet observations and meticulous records for simple attentiveness or good organizational skills, never fully grasping that Sophia's understanding of Daniel's delicate body was more profound, more intuitive, more intimately connected to his inner rhythms than even the most esteemed specialists they consulted from around the world, for while they meticulously documented his symptoms, prescribed complex medications, and performed expensive diagnostic tests, Sophia felt his condition, reading the subtle, unspoken language of his body with an almost supernatural clarity, her heart attuned to every shift in his fragile equilibrium, every minute change in his energy or mood, and it was this intimate, almost symbiotic relationship with Daniel that had made her utterly indispensable, not just to the boy, but to the very fragile fabric of their family's well-being, even if they couldn't always articulate or fully appreciate it, often seeing her as a highly competent, exceptionally reliable, rather than profoundly caring and deeply knowledgeable, asset, until this morning, when everything had fractured beyond repair. The morning of her firing had dawned with a deceptive calm, a gentle golden light filtering through the opulent windows of Atherton Manor, but Sophia had felt the shift in the air, a familiar, cold dread coiling in her stomach as she observed Daniel during breakfast, seeing the slight haziness in his usually sharp, intelligent blue eyes, the almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand as he lifted his spoon, struggling briefly to maintain control, and that faint, yet unmistakable, telltale aroma of bitter almond on his breath, a scent that screamed crisis impending, a familiar, terrifying prelude to a severe episode that could swiftly escalate into a life-threatening seizure, a prolonged period of unconsciousness, or worse, and she knew, with a chilling certainty that bypassed all medical protocols and doctor's orders, that his usual morning medication, a complex, meticulously calibrated cocktail of drugs that had served him well for a time, would not be enough, might even, in his current delicate state, exacerbate the impending crash, for she had noticed a subtle but concerning pattern in recent weeks, a gradual resistance building in his system to the prescribed regimen, a nuance that had stubbornly escaped the high-tech diagnostics and the specialists' discerning eyes, a unique metabolic shift that defied their conventional understanding, and without a moment's hesitation, driven by an instinct honed over years of crisis management, by an unwavering, fierce protectiveness, Sophia had acted, deviating boldly from the strict instructions left by the rotating team of nurses, administering a specific, homeopathic remedy, a potent herbal extract she had long studied and prepared herself, derived from ancient, trusted traditions, known for its powerful stabilizing properties for his particular, undiagnosed neural inflammation, a remedy she had only used in the direst, most resistant situations when conventional treatments proved inadequate, always keeping it a guarded secret lest it be seen as undermining the doctor's authority or dismissed as unscientific superstition, and then, crucially, she had quietly, deftly, removed his morning dose of the prescribed pharmaceutical medication, replacing it with a carefully measured, diluted herbal tea she knew would gently counteract the dangerous chemical imbalance she sensed brewing, a bold, risky move, a direct defiance of strict medical orders, a gamble with a young boy's life, but one she believed, with every fiber of her being, was absolutely necessary, vital, to avert the impending catastrophe, to pull him back from the precipice, and just hours later, Daniel had indeed experienced a sudden, dramatic spike in temperature, his small body convulsing briefly, followed by a brief, alarming moment of disorientation, symptoms that had, to Sophia's immense relief, quickly subsided, replaced by a deep, restorative, dreamless sleep, his body having successfully fought off the worst of the crisis, a victory Sophia attributed directly to her intervention, her quiet defiance, her profound trust in her own intuitive knowledge, but it was this very deviation that Eleanor, in a moment of panicked, furious oversight, had discovered, finding the untouched medication blister pack, its neat rows of pills still intact, and a half-empty bottle of Sophia's unlabeled, homemade herbal extract, along with a faint, unusual smell in Daniel's room, a scent she found foreign and unsettling, and In her immediate, panicked, and utterly furious state, Eleanor had misinterpreted Sophia's actions as nothing short of gross negligence, as reckless disregard, as a brazen, unforgivable disregard for her son's carefully managed health, a direct threat to his fragile existence, and her outrage had been swift and absolute, fueled by primal maternal fear, by an inherent distrust of anything outside her established, expensive medical paradigm, and a privileged assumption that only official, Western medical science held the answers, that Sophia's unscientific, instinctual approach was nothing short of a dangerous betrayal, a deliberate act of sabotage, leading directly to the immediate, unceremonious, and utterly devastating firing, the very act that had just saved Daniel's life now ironically severing his lifeline to the one person who truly understood his silent language of illness, his unique vulnerabilities, a decision that would not only cost them their most loyal servant, but would also, in the cruelest, most agonizing twist of fate, haunt the Athertons with a depth of regret they could not yet fathom, a regret that would scar their souls indelibly. The sting of Eleanor's words, the raw accusation in her voice, the cold, distant dismissal in Arthur's eyes, cut deeper into Sophia's heart than she could ever have imagined, deeper even than the public humiliation of being escorted out by security, deeper than the severance of her livelihood, for it was the knowledge that she was being severed from Daniel, the severing of their profound, almost mystical bond, that truly fractured her spirit, the unspoken, agonizing certainty that she was leaving him utterly vulnerable, exposed, a lamb to the slaughter of an insidious illness whose subtle, life-threatening signs only she recognized, only she could truly mitigate, and as she quietly, mechanically, packed her few belongings, her hands moving with a practiced efficiency that belied the turmoil within, her mind raced with a desperate urgency, a myriad of unspoken warnings she longed to impart, to scream, to write down in painstaking detail, a complex tapestry of symptoms and counter measures, but the words caught in her throat, choked by a profound sense of futility, for she knew, with an aching certainty, that no explanation, no plea, no logical argument, no amount of scientific evidence she could gather, would penetrate the thick wall of Eleanor's fear and Arthur's pride, their unshakable belief in their own judgment, their inherent distrust of anything outside their established, expensive medical paradigm, their almost religious adherence to what they considered proper medical care, and so, Sophia left, walking out of the grand, wrought-iron gates of Atherton Manor, leaving behind 30 years of unwavering loyalty, of quiet, often invisible service, of profound, unacknowledged love, feeling the immense, crushing weight of a secret she could not share, a burden of knowledge that felt like a curse, her heart heavy with the premonition of impending doom, her last glance lingering on Daniel's window, a silent promise to him, a silent prayer for his survival, a hope that somehow, someway, her quiet intervention had bought him enough precious time, that the family would, against all odds, eventually see the truth, for she understood that her silence, while preserving her dignity in Daniel's private struggles, also amplified their misunderstanding, making her seem guilty by omission, yet to betray Daniel's privacy by revealing the intimate details of his condition to those who chose not to see, or to expose her own unconventional methods and risk further censure, would have been an act of disloyalty to him, a violation of the sacred trust they shared, and so she chose silence, walking away with her head held high, though her soul was bleeding, stepping out of the opulence and into an uncertain future, carrying only the hope that her selfless act had indeed been enough, praying that Daniel's resilience, his innate strength, would see him through, and that the Athertons would not, in their arrogance and their blindness, let her sacrifice be in vain, unknowing that her absence would plunge the manor into a terrifying chaos that no amount of wealth or medical expertise could quell, a chaos that would expose the fragile foundations of their world and force them, agonizingly, to confront the very truth they had so vehemently rejected, the truth of their profound misjudgment and its devastating, life-threatening consequences. In the immediate days following Sophia's abrupt and dramatic departure, a profound, unsettling void settled over Atherton Manor, a silence deeper than the mere absence of her quiet movements and efficient presence, for the meticulously ordered household began to unravel in subtle, then undeniable ways, small inefficiencies accumulating into larger disruptions, but it was Daniel's health that plummeted most dramatically, most terrifyingly, almost immediately, as if his very system recognized the absence of its careful guardian, his condition rapidly deteriorating in a terrifying, relentless spiral, his symptoms returning with a vengeance, more virulent, more resistant to treatment than ever before, his gentle spirit fading under the relentless assault of his illness, his once bright eyes now dulled by pain and confusion, and his new, impeccably credentialed nurse, Miss Albright, a stickler for protocol and deeply dismissive of any folk remedies or non-conventional approaches, followed the doctor's orders with rigid, unyielding precision, but without Sophia's intuitive touch, her subtle, almost imperceptible adjustments, her unique ability to read the unspoken, nuanced language of Daniel's body, the meticulously prescribed medications seemed to lose their efficacy, failing to stem the tide of his rapidly declining health. His seizures became more frequent, more severe. His body racked by violent convulsions, his periods of unconsciousness longer and more profound, leaving him weak, disoriented, and increasingly withdrawn into a terrifying world of pain. And the medical specialists, summoned at immense cost from across the globe, ran endless tests, adjusted dosages with increasing desperation, conferred in hushed, worried tones in the sterile privacy of Arthur's study, but remained utterly baffled, their expensive equipment, their vast knowledge, their years of accumulated expertise unable to pinpoint the underlying cause of his sudden, precipitous decline. Unable to comprehend why their meticulously designed treatment plan was suddenly failing so spectacularly, why Daniel's body was simply giving up, and Eleanor, her initial anger at Sophia now completely obliterated, replaced by a chilling, all-consuming fear that bordered on hysteria, became a frantic, haunted shadow of her former self, clinging to Daniel's bedside, her heart a raw, bleeding wound of maternal anguish, her usually composed exterior shattered by a grief that threatened to consume her, while Arthur, his stoic demeanor completely cracking under the immense, crushing pressure, plunged into a desperate, all-consuming search for answers, for any shred of hope, his vast fortune now feeling utterly useless, impotent, in the face of his son's unbearable suffering, for they could buy the best doctors, the most advanced technology, the most prestigious opinions, but they couldn't buy understanding, couldn't buy the intuitive connection, the profound, empathetic knowledge that Sophia had possessed, a truth that slowly, agonizingly, began to dawn on James, Daniel's older brother, a pragmatic young man usually engrossed in his own burgeoning career, his world insulated by logic and ambition, but now deeply alarmed, profoundly shaken, by his brother's rapid, inexplicable decline, recalling how stable, how almost miraculously well, Daniel's condition had been under Sophia's care, a stability that had been taken for granted, an almost invisible blessing, and he began to notice small, unsettling details, the untouched herbal remedies Eleanor had so summarily dismissed, the way Daniel would occasionally, in his rare, fleeting moments of semi-lucidity, whisper Sophia's name, a faint, desperate plea for her presence, a plea that pricked at James's conscience, igniting a flicker of doubt, a nascent, uncomfortable question in his otherwise rational mind, for Sophia, despite her humble position, despite her quiet, unassuming presence, had been a rock, a constant, an unshakable force for good in their lives, a source of stability and care, and her sudden, dramatic, and fiercely condemned departure, coinciding so perfectly, so tragically, with Daniel's precipitous decline, felt like a gaping, inexplicable wound in the very fabric of their reality, a coincidence too stark, too chilling, too profoundly impactful to be mere chance, a seed of suspicion slowly but inexorably taking root in James's pragmatic, analytical mind, growing into a nagging, persistent insistence that something was profoundly, terribly wrong, and that the answers might lie not in the sterile, high-tech world of medicine, but in the quiet, dismissed wisdom of the woman they had so carelessly, so cruelly, cast aside, the woman whose name Daniel now whispered like a prayer. The seed of doubt, planted by Daniel's fading whispers and the stark, terrifying contrast in his health, began to germinate in James's mind with an alarming speed, growing into a relentless, gnawing suspicion that Sophia's dismissal was inextricably linked to his brother's rapid, inexplicable decline, a puzzle piece that refused to fit into the conventional narrative, and he started to question everything, meticulously replaying the events of that fateful morning in his mind's eye, recalling Eleanor's furious pronouncements about Sophia's reckless negligence and the unauthorized concoction, her almost hysterical condemnation, and then, a memory, sharp and unsettling, surfaced with undeniable clarity. Daniel, after that brief, alarming episode that morning of Sophia's firing, had not spiraled downwards immediately, but had slept deeply and peacefully for hours, waking calmer, more stable, more lucid than he had been in weeks, a temporary reprieve, a fleeting moment of peace that contrasted starkly with his current, desperate state, and James, a man of logic and reason, a natural problem-solver, immediately recognized the anomaly, the gaping hole in their accepted narrative. If Sophia's actions were indeed negligent and dangerous, why had Daniel briefly, yet undeniably, improved before his steep decline began only after Sophia left? This paradox became the key, unlocking a terrifying realization, a horrifying new perspective, and James, driven by a desperate need for answers, by a crushing, burgeoning sense of guilt and profound personal responsibility, began his own quiet, clandestine investigation, starting with Miss Albright, the new nurse, whose rigid adherence to protocol and unwavering belief in pharmaceutical solutions stood in stark, almost jarring contrast to Sophia's more fluid, intuitive, and remarkably successful approach, and he noticed that Miss Albright strictly administered only the prescribed medications, meticulously discarding anything else, any deviation from the official regimen considered utterly unacceptable, confirming that the herbal remedies Sophia often used were completely absent from Daniel's current care, not a trace of them to be found. And then, he found it, tucked away in Daniel's bedside table, a small, worn, leather-bound journal, its cover faded with use, a secret Sophia had taught Daniel to keep, a chronicle of his days, detailing his symptoms in a personalized code only Sophia understood, alongside meticulous notes on her specific, often unconventional, interventions, including the exact day Sophia had quietly removed his morning dose of medication and replaced it with a special tea, noting in Daniel's own shaky handwriting, Sophia's almond tea, nose feel better, headache gone, a record that precisely matched the day of his brief, mysterious improvement, a day that had stood out in James's memory as a brief, shining beacon of hope. And as James painstakingly cross-referenced the journal entries with Daniel's official medical charts, a horrifying, undeniable pattern emerged, a truth as clear as it was devastating. Daniel's condition had been remarkably stable, even showing subtle, consistent improvements. During the extensive period Sophia had discreetly integrated her remedies, often replacing or adjusting prescribed doses based on her unique, almost uncanny understanding of his specific body chemistry, while his health consistently, precipitously worsened when only the standard, conventional medical regimen was followed, precisely as it was now, a revelation that hit James with the force of a physical blow, a sickening wave of understanding, realizing with gut-wrenching clarity that Sophia hadn't been reckless, she had been a brilliant, intuitive healer, a quiet protector, a medical savant who had literally been keeping his brother alive by subtly adapting to his evolving needs, by circumventing the very medications that were proving ineffective or even harmful, buying him precious, life-saving time, and her reckless negligence was, in fact, an act of unparalleled, selfless medical genius, saving Daniel from the debilitating side effects or utter ineffectiveness of medications that weren't quite right for him, or that his body had built a resistance to, and the painful truth, sharp and undeniable, descended upon him, filling him with a burning shame so profound it made him physically ill, for they had not only dismissed Sophia, they had actively, ignorantly, dangerously endangered Daniel by severing his connection to the only person who truly understood his silent, suffering body, setting him on a path towards certain, irreversible decline, a death they themselves, in their blindness, had unknowingly orchestrated, and the guilt was a crushing, unbearable weight, knowing that every minute Sophia was absent was a minute Daniel moved closer to a terrible fate he had been, for so long, so unknowingly, protected from, a realization that galvanized James into desperate, frantic action, a relentless, all-consuming search for Sophia, the only person who could now save his fading brother, the only beacon of hope in their rapidly darkening world. The horrifying truth, painstakingly pieced together from Daniel's secret journal and James's agonizing, soul-shattering realization, struck Arthur and Eleanor with the force of a thunderbolt, shattering their pride, their denial, their meticulously constructed world of privilege, and their once unshakable belief in their own infallible judgment, leaving them reeling in the wreckage of their profound misjudgment. And Eleanor, her face a mask of profound grief, distorted by an unbearable, corrosive guilt, wept inconsolably, clutching Daniel's fading, lifeless hand, her sobs racking her entire body, the full, devastating weight of her furious misjudgment crushing her spirit, rendering her almost incapable of coherent thought, while Arthur, his usual stoicism completely shattered, his formidable business acumen now utterly useless, paced his study like a caged lion, his mind racing through a maelstrom of regret and self-recrimination, grappling with the unthinkable reality that his vast wealth, his extensive connections, his unwavering, almost arrogant belief in conventional medicine and the superiority of paid expertise had all been woefully inadequate, useless, and worse, that his blind trust in them, his dismissal of anything outside his privileged sphere, had led him to condemn the very person who was Daniel's anchor, his lifeline, his silent, steadfast guardian, and the shame, the crushing, debilitating, existential shame, was almost unbearable, knowing they had not only wronged Sophia in the most egregious way possible, but had, in their arrogance, in their unforgivable ignorance, condemned their own beloved son to a slow, agonizing decline, to an agonizing death they had inadvertently caused, for Daniel's condition had worsened precipitously, his frail body now barely clinging to life, his breathing shallow and labored, his seizures now almost constant, relentless, his fragile hold on life weakening with each passing hour. The top specialists, their faces grim and weary, admitting defeat, offering only palliative care, hushed discussions of comfort measures and the inevitability of brain damage, of complete organ failure, a death sentence hanging heavy and cold in the once vibrant, now haunted, air of the manor, and in this darkest hour, as hope dwindled to a fragile, dying ember, flickering precariously in the suffocating gloom, James, his voice tight with urgency and a newfound authority born of his terrible discovery and profound sense of responsibility, presented his parents with the indisputable, damning evidence from Daniel's worn journal, the detailed entries, the correlations, the undeniable proof of Sophia's profound, life-saving insight, her genius, her almost supernatural connection to Daniel's unique physiology, and he explained, his voice breaking with emotion, how Sophia had seen what doctors could not, how her quiet, unconventional interventions had kept Daniel stable, vibrant, alive for years, how her dismissal had directly, tragically triggered his current, desperate state, and the raw, agonizing truth finally, irrevocably, broke through their defenses, leaving them stripped bare, exposed, facing the catastrophic, irreversible consequences of their profound misjudgment, their unthinking prejudice, realizing with sickening clarity that they hadn't just lost a Maid, they had lost Daniel's only hope, his only chance, and the search for Sophia became a frantic, desperate odyssey, fueled by a searing, all-consuming remorse and the terrifying knowledge that every passing moment brought Daniel closer to the brink, closer to an irreversible death. Their vast resources, once employed for luxurious acquisitions and opulent comforts, now deployed with a singular, desperate focus for the almost impossible task of finding the woman they had so casually, so cruelly cast aside, their only hope for redemption, for Daniel's precious, fading life, resting solely on Sophia's return, on her unique wisdom, on her unwavering, selfless love, a love they had so tragically misunderstood, so unforgivably betrayed, a love that was now their only, last, desperate prayer. The search for Sophia was agonizing, a frantic, guilt-ridden chase against time, for the sprawling city was vast, and Sophia, after her dismissal, had seemingly vanished like a whisper in the wind, leaving no forwarding address, no contact numbers, as if she had dissolved completely from their lives, taking with her the sole key to Daniel's survival, a precious, irreplaceable key they had so thoughtlessly thrown away, and Arthur, leveraging every contact, every resource, every private investigator money could buy, launched an extensive, desperate, all-consuming hunt, his formidable business empire now entirely focused on this singular, most vital mission, his usual sharp focus now clouded by fear and profound regret, while Eleanor, racked with remorse, her elegant clothes and tear-streaked face a jarring contrast to the humble surroundings, visited every shelter, every community center, every church in the neglected, working-class areas Sophia might have lived before coming to Atherton Manor, her usual aristocratic poise completely shattered, her voice a raw, pleading whisper as she recounted her terrible mistake to strangers, begging for any clue, any hint of Sophia's whereabouts, her pride completely annihilated, replaced by a desperate, primal maternal anguish that now, finally, overshadowed everything else, and James, meanwhile, meticulously combed through old household records, old pay stubs, faint, half-forgotten memories of Sophia mentioning distant relatives or old friends, piecing together fragments of her past, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread with every dead end, every unanswered query, for Daniel's condition continued to worsen with horrifying rapidity, his breathing shallow and sporadic, his frail body growing weaker by the hour, his seizures now an almost constant, relentless assault on his fading consciousness. The specialists now openly discussing the inevitability of brain damage, of complete organ failure. Their prognosis grim, a death sentence hanging heavy, cold, and inescapable in the air of the once vibrant manor, a manor now steeped in a terrifying silence, and just as despair threatened to engulf them, as the last vestiges of hope began to flicker and die, a breakthrough, small but potent, emerged from Arthur's vast network of contacts, a faint lead from a distant charity that Sophia had quietly volunteered with years ago, a small soup kitchen in a neglected, underprivileged part of the city, a place she had never spoken of, a testament to her quiet, unassuming benevolence, her unwavering compassion for those less fortunate, and the lead suggested she might have returned to live near her estranged sister, a name and a rough address provided with a weary, knowing sigh from the charity coordinator who remembered Sophia's kindness, her quiet strength, her profound integrity, and Arthur, Eleanor, and James, their hearts pounding with a mixture of terror and exhilarating hope. Their faces etched with desperation, immediately set out, their expensive car an incongruous sight in the rundown neighborhood, drawing curious glances, their desperation palpable, almost a living entity within the confined space of the vehicle, knowing that this was their last chance, their absolute final hope, to find Sophia, to beg for her forgiveness, to plead for Daniel's life, knowing that if they failed, Daniel would be lost to them forever, and their lives, already hollowed out by grief, and regret, would be forever haunted by the specter of their profound, unforgivable mistake, a mistake that had cost them more than money, more than pride. It had cost them the life of their beloved son, their cherished heir, and the woman who held the key to his salvation, the woman whose unwavering love they had so tragically, so arrogantly, dismissed. They found Sophia in a small, immaculately kept apartment above a bustling bakery, the warm, comforting scent of fresh bread mingling with the faint, medicinal aroma of the herbal remedy she was meticulously preparing, her hands, still strong and capable, now engaged in a different, more personal form of quiet healing, a quiet continuation of her life's purpose. And when Arthur, Eleanor, and James appeared at her door, their faces pale and drawn, etched with exhaustion and profound sorrow, a palpable aura of desperation clinging to them like a shroud, Sophia's eyes, usually so warm and full of empathy, hardened imperceptibly, a fleeting flicker of the deep wound they had inflicted, a ghost of the injustice she had suffered, but she merely stood aside, allowing them entry, her posture still holding that familiar, unyielding dignity, that quiet strength that had always defined her, and the apologies, when they came, were torrential, choked with tears and raw, visceral shame. Eleanor, falling to her knees on Sophia's worn rug, her elegant clothes now stained with tears, her voice a broken whisper, "Sophia, please, please forgive us, we were so wrong, so terribly, terribly wrong. Daniel is dying, Sophia, he's dying without you, his little body is giving up, please, you're his only hope." Her words a desperate, guttural plea that cut through Sophia's carefully constructed composure, piercing the wall she had built around her heart, and Arthur, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, his formidable presence reduced to that of a shattered man, his voice hoarse with unspeakable regret, added, "We understand now, Sophia. James found Daniel's journal. We know you saved him, you were protecting him. We were blind, we were fools. Please, Sophia, we beg you, come back. Save our son." His words a testament to the complete shattering of his pride, his complete, utter surrender to the terrible, agonizing truth of their folly, and James, his own eyes red-rimmed and filled with a profound guilt that etched lines of sorrow on his young face, stepped forward, handing her Daniel's worn journal, its pages a silent, eloquent testament to her genius, her unwavering care. "Sophia, he needs you. More than anything. We all need you. Please, don't let our blindness be his end, don't let our unforgivable mistake cost him his life." His voice cracking with the unbearable weight of his brother's fading life, the terror of his impending loss, and Sophia, looking at their broken faces, seeing the genuine remorse, the profound grief, the utter desperation that stripped away all pretense of privilege, but most importantly, seeing the desperate, unwavering love for Daniel that finally, truly illuminated their eyes, a love that transcended their earlier arrogance, felt a painful softening in her heart. For despite their flaws, their arrogance, their unforgivable mistake, they were Daniel's parents, and her love for Daniel, her profound, maternal bond with him, transcended all personal hurt, all bitterness, all resentment, for his life was a fragile, precious thing, hanging by the thinnest of threads, and she, Sophia, was his guardian, his protector, his lifeline. And so, with a deep sigh that carried the weight of years of silent sacrifice, of quiet suffering, Sophia simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the worn journal, on Daniel's shaky handwriting, a quiet, almost imperceptible tremor passing through her, a tremor of renewed purpose, knowing that her path, her destiny, was inextricably linked to his, and that her return was not just an act of forgiveness, but an act of unwavering, profound love, a love that knew no bounds, no resentments, only the singular, burning desire to save the boy whose life had always been, in her heart, her most precious charge, her true legacy. And without another word, her movements imbued with a renewed, quiet urgency, she moved, gathering her remedies, her medical kit, her silent purpose unwavering, her spirit reignited by a sacred mission, ready to return to the opulent mansion that had so carelessly, so cruelly cast her out, ready to face the impossible task of pulling Daniel back from the very edge of death, her quiet strength now the only thing standing between him and the encroaching darkness, a strength that had been forged in a lifetime of quiet service, and now, by the crucible of profound, unjust suffering, refined into an unshakable force for life. The journey back to Atherton Manor was fraught with a silent, desperate tension, the silence in the car heavy with unspoken apologies and fervent prayers, each minute feeling like an eternity as Daniel's precious life hung in the balance, and as Sophia stepped back into the familiar, grand foyer, the oppressive weight of Daniel's deteriorating health immediately palpable in the hushed, almost funereal atmosphere that permeated every polished surface. Her quiet presence, though unassuming, felt like a sudden, profound shift, a tiny flicker of hope, almost imperceptible yet undeniable, igniting in the hearts of the anxious, weary staff, and she went directly to Daniel's room, her senses immediately attuned to the subtle, almost imperceptible changes in his breathing, the faint, metallic scent in the air that spoke of a deep metabolic imbalance, a symphony of distress signals only she, with her intimate knowledge, could truly decipher. And as she looked at him, frail and frighteningly pale in the vast, imposing bed, his small face etched with the suffering of a long, arduous battle, his eyes barely fluttering, a wave of profound sorrow washed over Sophia, a deep ache for his pain, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce, protective resolve, for he was still breathing, still fighting, still holding on, and where there was life, however faint, there was always hope, and she immediately, without hesitation, dismissed the bewildered new nurse, Miss Albright, with a quiet authority that brooked no argument, no dissent, her dismissal polite but firm. Then Sophia set about her work, her movements precise, deliberate, a practiced choreography of care that flowed from years of intimate knowledge, first checking Daniel's pulse, the dilation of his pupils, the minute tremors in his muscles, her fingers gently tracing the delicate bones of his wrist, her touch a balm that seemed to calm his restless spirit, a familiar comfort he instinctively recognized even in his semi-conscious state. And then, she began to administer a new regimen, a carefully concocted series of herbal infusions, microdoses of precisely balanced nutrients, and subtle massage techniques, all designed not to fight aggressively against the illness, but to gently coax his body back from the brink, to re-establish the delicate equilibrium that had been so violently disrupted. A treatment plan based not on blind faith in a single pharmaceutical, but on a holistic, intuitive understanding of his unique pathology, an intricate dance between ancient wisdom and meticulous observation, all while whispering soothing words to Daniel, a quiet stream of encouragement and love that seemed to reach him even in his deepest unconsciousness, a lifeline of sound in his silent suffering. And in the days that followed, Sophia remained a constant, vigilant presence at Daniel's bedside, barely sleeping, her energy a boundless wellspring of devotion, her every action a testament to her profound love, her hands always gentle, always knowing, always tireless, as she meticulously charted his progress, noting every subtle shift, every minute improvement, every whisper of returning strength. And slowly, painstakingly, agonizingly, Daniel began to respond, the frequency of his seizures diminishing, their intensity lessening, his breathing growing stronger, deeper, the healthy color slowly returning to his pale cheeks, a miraculous transformation that defied all medical expectations, a testament to Sophia's unparalleled insight and unwavering care, her quiet genius. And Arthur and Eleanor, witnessing this gradual, almost unbelievable recovery, were humbled beyond measure, their earlier arrogance completely obliterated, replaced by a profound, reverent gratitude that transcended all social barriers, all previous misunderstandings, all ingrained prejudices, for Sophia had not just saved their son, she had saved them, pulling them back from the precipice of a grief that would have consumed them whole, teaching them a profound, unforgettable lesson about the true nature of wisdom, of healing, and of unconditional love, a love that had defied their prejudice, their ignorance, their cruel dismissal, and had, against all odds, brought their fading son back to life. Her quiet, unwavering presence in their lives now a sacred testament to her enduring strength, her boundless compassion, and the profound, transformative power of her silent, self-sacrificing heart. And as Daniel's recovery progressed, slow but steady, a palpable, irreversible shift occurred within Atherton Manor, a profound transformation that began with Arthur and Eleanor, their hearts cracked open by fear and remorse, now filled with an overwhelming, almost reverent gratitude for Sophia, whose presence in Daniel's room felt like a miracle unfolding before their very eyes. And they watched, humbled and awestruck, as Sophia continued her meticulous care, her hands gentle but firm, her eyes keenly observing every nuance of Daniel's returning vitality, from his first flicker of recognition in his eyes to his tentative, whispered Sophia, a word that brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes, tears not of sorrow but of profound relief and gratitude, a word that solidified the true depth of Sophia's irreplaceable bond with their son. And their apologies, once desperate and tearful, now became a quiet, constant stream of appreciation, of genuine self-reproach, as they finally began to truly see Sophia not just as a maid, not as a hired hand, but as a wise, intuitive healer, a steadfast guardian. The very embodiment of unwavering loyalty and profound, selfless love, a love they had once so carelessly dismissed, so thoughtlessly trampled. And Arthur, his formidable business acumen now tempered by a newfound humility and a deeper understanding of true value, restructured their entire approach to Daniel's care, ensuring Sophia was not just an integral part of his medical team, but the central, guiding figure, empowering her to make crucial decisions, to integrate her unique knowledge with The best of conventional medicine, creating a truly holistic, patient-centered approach that had, quite simply, saved his son, and Eleanor, shedding her superficial social concerns, her meticulously curated life now irrevocably changed, dedicated herself to supporting Sophia, learning about the herbal remedies, understanding the subtle science of intuition, recognizing the profound wisdom that resided in quiet observation, becoming a fervent advocate for Sophia's methods, her elegant hands now sometimes helping Sophia prepare tinctures, her voice now speaking of Sophia's genius with a fierce, protective pride, transforming from a haughty employer into a respectful, almost reverent partner in Daniel's healing journey, a profound personal metamorphosis, and James, filled with a deep, personal remorse and an immense gratitude for Sophia's quiet, unwavering forgiveness, became her silent ally, her advocate, ensuring her comfort, her respect, her rightful, elevated place in their lives. His earlier skepticism completely shattered, replaced by an unshakable faith in Sophia's wisdom, her unparalleled connection to his brother, and Daniel, as he slowly but surely regained his strength, his mind clearer, his spirit brighter than before, became a living testament to Sophia's miracle, his bond with her now deeper, more sacred than ever, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of her sacrifice, her unwavering love, for Sophia had not only saved his life, she had, in a profound, indelible way, awakened his family to a deeper understanding of compassion, of worth, of the true, incalculable value of human connection that transcended all superficial distinctions of class, of race, or of wealth, and her place in the Atherton household, though still defined by her gentle, unassuming service, was now elevated, infused with an unshakable reverence, a profound respect that no title, no amount of wealth, no societal status could ever truly convey. She had healed their son, but more profoundly, she had healed their family, mending the fractured trust, teaching them a harsh but invaluable lesson about looking beyond superficial appearances, beyond prejudice, beyond the easy, comfortable narratives of their privileged world, to recognize the profound dignity and selfless love that can reside in the most unexpected places, a love that had, through immense suffering and unjust dismissal, ultimately brought light and life back into their home, forever cementing Sophia's legacy as the true, unsung hero of Atherton Manor, the woman who, though fired, had ultimately saved their son's life, transforming their world with the quiet, unwavering power of her extraordinary heart, a heart that beat with an enduring, boundless compassion that changed everything. This was today's story on Star Tales. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales that touch the heart.